Well, what better day than today to go out there and talk about the Vancouver Canucks? So, earlier yesterday, we watched the Vancouver Canucks defeat the Columbus Blue Jackets 4-3 at home. It was a pretty big deal. Big comeback, despite the lack of power play execution and the Elias Pettersson drop pass generator. The Vancouver Canucks walked away out of this game with the win, but now they have a much bigger task on their hands. Because later today, the Vancouver Canucks will be playing off against the Colorado Avalanche. The big, bad Avs, the team that just whooped the Edmonton Oilers 9-1 yesterday and is not looking to slow down. I'm personally cheering for Victor Olofsson, because I kind of need him to go off in fantasy today. But anyways, this is going to happen later tonight. 7 p.m. Pacific Standard is the puck drop. But I wanted to, instead of actually talking about this game I wanted to talk more so about the rebuild. Because I think that word has been tossed out more so in the past few days than it has over the past few months worth of Vancouver Canucks hockey. And a lot of that has to do with the results the Canucks have accomplished on the ice this season. The injuries, of course, that plays a part into it. And we already spoke about this last night, but because of all of the rebuild talk, when you saw Vancouver Canucks GM Patrik Allvin head over onto After Hours, literally the majority of the questions were talking about the rebuild, the players. Oh, Pettersson, how do you feel about him? Quinn, Hughes, how do you feel about him? We alluded to this last night in the post-game video, but Patrik Allvin essentially in the After Hours showcase, despite the fact that Scott Oake was going out there and mentioning other teams that were down in the dumps that have eventually overtaken Vancouver, Allvin mentioned several times that rebuilding with this group of guys, with Demko, Hughes, Pettersson, it's not going to happen. The rebuild question was shut down, and we ended up speaking about all the other stuff that Allvin said. He praised Quinn Hughes for being a leader and for stepping up in the game against Columbus, which he did. He praised Elias Pettersson for dealing with all the pressure of needing to be the team's top center, and that he needs to shoot more, essentially. And a lot of the comments on our Canucks go out there and say the same thing. Patrik Allvin completely dodged the rebuild questions like a politician. I don't know if he dodged them. I took away from his response that a rebuild is off the table while they have this group of guys. Now, if Hughes doesn't want to resign, who knows how that changes things. But I got the sense that there's no appetite amongst management and ownership for a rebuild. So that is essentially the same messaging that I think Vancouver Canucks fans have been accustomed to over the past few years. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that, that's up to you. That's a totally other conversation. But I wanted to expand more so on what's going on with the rebuild and the what could have beens of the world. Because this was posted by Patrick Johnston earlier this morning on The Province that talks about the rebuild question and how the Vancouver Canucks are in the NHL's mushy middle. They don't want to be, but it's hard to see how they rise out of it. Now, the big part from this article that was quoted and cut and pasted and everything was posted separately onto Twitter. This is what Taj went out there and said. It's the article that we just looked at, but there's a screenshot included. Mike Gillis proposed a quick rebuild plan that would have resulted in the Vancouver Canucks having 4 first-round picks in the 2014 draft. Kesler to the Ducks for 2 first-rounders. Burrows to the Flyers for another first. The plan was rejected by ownership because it risked missing the playoffs. And this is the Patrick Johnston article. For a decade, ownership has been afraid of the word rebuild, and look at what it's gotten to them. To recap, it all goes back to 2014, when the Canucks wanted to make aggressive moves to take away from that 2011 squad. Gillis was ready to trade Kesler to Anaheim in a deal that would have netted 2 firsts, and Burrows to the Flyers in another deal that would have returned another first. They would have had 4 first-rounders in 2014, and all 4 of them would probably have been on the NHL roster by 2016. And we know that Kesler was traded to Anaheim for a first, plus Bonino and Spiza. That deal was very difficult to comprehend as the long-term Vancouver Canucks played out. But if you think about the other draft picks, we have the 2014 NHL Entry Draft available for us to look at. Take a look at this. So, obviously, Vancouver had their own 6th overall pick. They took Jake Virtanen. The possibility, best case scenario, you could have had William Nylander. That is always going to go down as one of the worst Vancouver Canucks decisions. Then you had yourselves Anaheim, the 10th overall pick. Vancouver could have had this pick had they just decided to get a 2nd first for Ryan Kesler instead of Bonino and Spiza. And Nick Ritchie was the guy that Anaheim took. Well, guess who went right after? Kevin Fiala did. He also had Dylan Larkin in this range of guys, whom reportedly the Vancouver Canucks really liked. The 17th overall pick belonged to the Philadelphia Flyers, who decided to take Travis Sanheim in that selection of guys. And then you have Alex Tuch, who was taken right after in the 18th overall spot by the Minnesota Wild. And that is always going to go down, I think, as one of the more intriguing conversations of this Canucks team, that if everything went right, if they got themselves the appropriate guys at the appropriate draft spots, you could realistically be looking at a team that housed William Nylander, Dylan Larkin, Alex Tuch, and even Jared McCann. Jared McCann was an okay pickup at that spot. It's just David Pastrnak went right after, and it was already noted by Jim Benning and the scouting staff in that area that, hey, the Canucks were super pissed off that the scouting did not see David Pastrnak, and they didn't know that he was a really talented player that was available in that spot. Just think about what the Vancouver Canucks could have looked like if they had Nylander, Larkin, Tuch, Pastrnak. Even you just replace Pastrnak with McCann, that's still so much better than what the Canucks got out of that draft with Jake Virtanen. And if they kept the 2nd round pick, they still would have taken Thatcher Demko. This team would have been totally changed up front. And in hindsight, things look so different because of Vancouver's unwillingness to depart from the playoffs. They wanted a playoff team. That's why the Canucks got a trade done for Kesler that included Bonino and Spiza. They're able to stay competitive, right? That's what they wanted. That was the ultimate goal. But now, if we head back over to some of the discourse, this is what Arpon BC went out there and said. 11 years ago, the Vancouver Canucks could not rebuild because of the Sedins, even though the Kings rebuilt a few years later with an older Kopitar and an older Drew Doughty. Now, we can't rebuild because of Hughes and EP40, even though Hughes is leaving after this season, and Elias is overpaid by at least $5 million. The excuses for not rebuilding are incredibly lazy and hair-pulling. It's like they're trying to insult their smartest and most profitable consumer. And so, it does strike a chord with a lot of Canucks fans, the unwillingness that this team is displaying to go down that rebuild path. And Patrik Allvin confirming that yesterday, it's not surprising. You know, he's not going to go out there and say, oh yeah, we're going to trade everybody. We don't want these guys, this and that. Like, that is obviously not an option for this team right now. But the question is, you know, what other moves can you do to actually build towards the future in that way? You know, everybody's talking about short term, Quinn Hughes, you got to keep him, make moves to make him happy, whatever. But what happens with Kiefer Sherwood? Do the Canucks re-sign him? Do they go down the entire Dakota Joshua situation one more time with Sherwood? If they trade Sherwood away and thus admit to themselves, okay, we'd be better off with a pick or something, does that signal to Quinn Hughes the wrong thing? And does that increase his willingness to leave? I don't know. But At the end of the day, we'll see what happens because later today the Canucks have the Avalanche and we'll talk about that after the game is over. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this shocking Canucks rebuild information. How Vancouver could have legitimately had Alex Tuch. They could have had Dylan Larkin. They could have had Nylander if they just took different guys in the 2014 draft. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. If you didn't, the dislike button's down there for you as well. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.